Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Maitri Sitharaman.
I take my bows when I get them and the applause when I get them. So you heard the voice of God, and if I haven't introduced myself to you before, my name is Maitri Sitharaman. I'm the editor of the Chief Brief and also the founding member here at GLOBSEC's Women Leaders Council. And it's my absolute pleasure on behalf of the Women Leaders Council to really talk to you about the Georgian dream, right? It has taken on a whole new context, and depending on whom you ask, it's either a dream or a nightmare for what it means for democracy and, of course, all the dangers that lie ahead for all of us. So without much further ado, please welcome President Salome Zurabishvili. Thank you very much, Madam President, for joining us. We have not much time to go through issues that an entire country faces and also signals that an entire region is taking from what's happening in Georgia. I want to kick it off with a question to you about something that happened a day or 2 days ago, in Milan, where the Georgian consulate was formally opened with a very glamorous party. You went on social media and questioned that very premise of the opening and the inauguration, saying this consulate had been there since 2023. What kind of signal did the Milan mayor give to Europe and to Georgia about this particular government, its legitimacy that you've been questioning for a while now?
I think no signal. I think the mayor of Milan was probably convinced by the mayor of Tbilisi, who is an old soccer player from the Milan team. So they either knew each other or had common connaissances that linked them. So it's more, I think, something that was organized informally. Maybe was not completely aware of the situation of Georgia and the fact that Georgia, since the elections of 2024, the rigged elections, that the Georgian officials of the Georgian ruling party are isolated from their European partners, maybe didn't care to ask to the foreign ministry of his country any explanation. So I don't give that too much importance. One thing, although, is important, is that this 10 attempts by the ruling party, each time they have the occasion to do so, to have a handshake or to have a picture or to have that kind where they brought 6 ministers. It's never seen anywhere.
And I understand a choir.
And a choir, and the consulate was opened 2 years ago. So they try that each time, and not so much to restart some business as usual, because there would be significant steps they could take to get that. No, they do that towards the Georgian public opinion. It's together with the repressions that are ongoing and the whole set of repressive laws. It's a way to discourage the population. The message is sent back home, and it's to tell the people, don't have any hopes about your European partners. They're going to, one day or the other, come back to us and restart the business as usual contacts.
So what do your European partners have to do to circumnavigate the kind of messaging that's coming out from the actors in Georgia at this point? Well, what are some two or three concrete things they can do? Because we can talk in the air, we can be airy-fairy about it, but what do you need right now?
What we need right now is the continuation of the non-recognition, de facto non-recognition policy. We know that it's not going to become a de jure non-recognition policy. That's why I'm not called the president, but the 5th president, the whatever, that's trying to navigate around the legal aspects of all that. But what is happening, the non-recognition, is very important. The individual nation sanctions that have been taken by some European states because the European Union as such could not decide because of existing non-consensus, could not decide on common collective sanctions. That is very important because in a small country like Georgia, sanctions work. Georgia is not Iran, Georgia is not Russia, Georgia is not China, so it needs to have outside contact. The businessmen, even when they are linked to the ruling party, need to have outside contacts. So it's hurting, and it's hurting them, and so it's creating in the ruling party and its first circle, it's creating tensions, it's creating weaknesses, and that's the whole aim of sanctions. Not to radically change a policy, but to try to put some dents into it.
And do you think that will immediately start giving pain? Because
it has.
It has already, and
it has already given pain, but nobody can say how fast and how far that's going to affect the strengths of the power that is based on repression.
I can see Margvelashvili sitting in the front row, and no one covers Georgia in this room like her. So if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, and I might open this up early to questions, if I can get someone to give you a mic. Can we get a mic to... Oh, we'll get a mic to her.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, can you pinpoint what worries you and what you would want her to really focus on at this point? What's the biggest question on your mind?
Thank you very much for putting me on the spot here. Madam President, very nice to see you here at GLOBSEC. I'm, of course, very worried about Georgia, much like many Georgia's friends, and I'm originally from Georgia. So one thing that, it's kind of follow-up to your previous question, Maitri. It seems like situation is sort of stuck. And it may not sound good, but from the outside, when somebody's not involved in day-to-day activities in Georgia, that's how it looks like. So is there a timeline that momentum can be connected to? Is there a date or is there an event that you would like to see, people help, opposition unite? What can this momentum be connected to? That's a very general question, I understand, and maybe hard to answer, but are you thinking in those terms?
Well, first of all, I would agree with your definition that the situation is stuck, because despite the things that we might read from outside, that the government is getting, the ruling party is getting stronger and stronger through repression, that's not necessarily the case. They're getting stronger on one side, but on the other side, people are leaving or are being dismissed, and we have the traditional infeuding and lack of trust between the ruling party that you see at the last stage of these authoritarian regimes. How long the last stage, I don't know. On the other side, the population that has been protesting really for 2.5 years and not only for the 195 days, is certainly tired of looking of what will happen. And so it's a heavy load, I would say, on the people that are protesting on the street, and the heavy load on the opposition parties that I'm trying to federate as usual, but because they are asked to deliver something that is not very clear how they can deliver it. So how long and how can that, what date? I think that the date we are expecting from outside, if anything, what we can expect from the European Union is two things. One is to describe the situation, say that this is not just a political crisis, it's a state that's being captured by Russia without a fight. And that's what's happening. A state, a democracy, all the state institutions are exactly in the same situation as in Russia. One party, one man that is controlling absolutely everything. So that has to be said. It's not just elections that were rigged. It's not just an authoritarian derive from the democratic path that was followed by Georgia. And so the next stage, after having described and said what is happening and that is what is condemned, the next stage is to say, well, you have to make a decision about your future. We are not the ones punishing Georgia or Georgians. It's the ruling party that is taking the decision. Here we offer either to come back to the path that Georgian people have wanted to follow for ever, and that's possible still, or you continue on the Russian path, and that's what you have to expect and set out but that has to be linked with a date. That can be October 4th, have then the parliamentary and local elections, or the parliamentary and later on local elections. If we have to choose a date, that's a set date in the Constitution, so we might as well use it. But the conditionality policy that I'm calling for, which is a little bit like the Megobari Act from the United States, which would be, it's not existing yet, has to be set in a calendar. It cannot be just an open proposal.
So that brings up the question of, if that is the date, media freedom comes into question, political persecution comes into question.
Everything.
Every single thing comes into question. So how confident are you that those elections will be free and fair when you have foreign funding for media currently being used almost as a tool in many, many states, including here in Europe, about whether that freedom exists, whether you can actually have all the new laws with non-profits can exist. You're dealing with a whole amalgamation of what I call crazy. So next time you have an election, will it be legitimate?
We have to be very clear. Next time we have elections, and
local or otherwise,
whatever, it will be war. It will not be regular elections, partisan elections. It will be elections to fight and win back this country and put it back on its European path. So that means, and we have, despite the ideas that the pro-European opposition parties are all divided, yes, they are sometimes divided, sometimes together, but we have already a document that sets out the absolute necessary conditions that have to be filled or won in order to consider that these elections, that we can call the population to the elections. And these are conditions that are very clear and that do not need legislative changes, because we know that we cannot get that with the existing parliament. So it will be a fight through elections and not elections in a regular way.
Will we have an opposition? Because you and I were chatting as we were walking, and you said even in the last 24 hours, we're seeing opposition leaders get arrested, potentially jailed by Monday, with different punishments for different folks to divide you some more. Will there be an opposition even by October?
Well, there is an opposition. There is an opposition in the streets, on the streets, and the opposition, even with the leaders in jail, can continue to be opposition. So there are different ways in which that can be fought, but it will have to be fought, and it will have to be supported also from our partners to support the demands for changes that we require. But all of that being said, I think that talking about democratic crisis, talking about elections, should not obliterate the fact that we are not talking about a regular political crisis or just another, unfortunately we have many, another democratic or quasi-democratic country going down the authoritarian path. We are here talking together with that, with a major challenge, which is a Russian challenge. It is a geopolitical challenge and a geopolitical crisis. Russia is capturing the Georgian state. which it didn't manage to do through military intervention, as it is not managing to do with Ukraine today. And it is capturing the state at a absolutely very low cost through these rigged elections, through a proxy ruling party, through some leaders that it controls, through probably some corruption links, through directly some Russian agents that are in Georgia and have been there during the last period. And that is a hybrid strategy that is tested in Georgia. And everybody should be looking at what is happening in Georgia, because if you can win over Georgia, which has been probably the most resilient country through the Soviet years, and very well aware of its identity and its national aspirations, then you can win over any other country. So it's something that really challenges everyone. And it's a challenge to European foreign policy. It's a challenge to enlargement policy. It's a challenge to what the European Union is bringing to all the countries that are
And it's not
aspiring.
something we can ignore because it's happening again at our doorstep. So let me ask you this. You've said this is a war with Russia, which we all would agree it is. But when you look at the United States and you ask it for help, in the last 24 hours, we just saw Senator Alex Padilla in California handcuffed and forcibly removed from Kristi Noem's immigration press conference. You've seen the battle between Governor Newsom and President Trump. Is it starting to feel for you a little too familiar when you're looking at potential allies with the current enemy that you're fighting and saying, are the lines being blurred? As a president, to a president, what is that conversation going to look like going forward?
Which president?
Donald Trump.
Well, we had and have these messages, at least, going to the... there are two different things. There are the inner democratic battles that have to be fought by each country, for each country, and we're fighting ours. And there you do not count much on anybody outside, because clearly today the challenges are for everyone. And then there is the strategy. There is a geopolitics. Who do we want to control the Black Sea? And I'm very clear, if I have to discuss with President Trump, what I can tell him about who has to control the Black Sea and why it's in the American interest not to have Russia controlling the Black Sea. Who has to control the Caucasus, which is also beyond the Black Sea, the road towards Central Asia. And the Russians knew for centuries that whoever controls Tbilisi and Georgia controls the whole of Caucasus, even if it's not the country that has the most resources in the region. What is the regime that United States would need to have for its own interests in place in Georgia? Is it the one that went to Tehran, or has now and is bringing China on the shores of the Black Sea for the first time? So we have a lot of common interests. And again, the democratic battles, which I can, for myself and personally, share or be worried about, as to be fought by each one for its own country.
Each one for its own country. We do have time for a question if anyone has one. Yes, the gentleman at the back there. But very short, because literally I have 3 minutes on the clock and people are yelling.
Thank you. I will be very short. Madam President, you outlined very clearly why Europe should care about this, but I wonder if nevertheless you do feel a little disappointed by European policy. Let me offer a characterization that you can work with.
If you can introduce yourself first.
Nicholas Stradman, I work for Oxford Analytica. Let me offer a characterization which you can work against, which is EU policy finds it easier to work with a democratic government in the South Caucasus, in this case Armenia, than it does to work with a democratic civil society. And so actually you face a crowding out problem as well as a structural problem.
Well, it's very true, because all these institutions, and the European Union is an institution, works better with state institutions and with a government that is properly elected than with a civil society, especially when the civil society is cut from all its links with the outside world, which is happening every day. If I had to be disappointed about something, that I understand. What I can be disappointed is a lack by the European Union of an expressed policy towards Georgia. What is happening is a challenge to the credibility of the European Union, who has granted candidate status to this country not even 2 years ago, and that country can suddenly start in rhetoric be insulting European Union and all its different countries' ambassadors, and be turning its back on the European Union. And the European Union does not react much, doesn't say that is not something that is acceptable, even if it doesn't have, and that we can understand, real instruments of policy to change the situation. As we internal opposition to this regime do not have necessarily all the instruments to change, but that doesn't prevent you from saying the truth and qualifying what is happening, which I think is important for everybody to know, that it's not a political crisis. It's Russia capturing a country. And you cannot accept that. We cannot accept that.
Well, unfortunately, I was going to take the lovely lady's question, but the clock is really ticking down. So I'm going to ask a final question from you, and I think we'd all love to know the answer. Would you consider returning to frontline politics or the leadership of the opposition? And if you ever do consider that, and feel free to answer with a no, what would be your priorities? And if you wouldn't, what would be your advice for the priorities for this opposition to actually regain any trust in any of the disillusioned Georgians out there?
The priority, and
but first, would you lead the opposition?
Well, I will answer. The priority is to free the country from the creeping Russian control that we are experimenting, and to reach that objective, I would be in any position as the legitimate president, as leader of a unified opposition, any place in which I can lead that fight for really freeing Georgia from getting back to the stage it was in before the first independence in 1918, or before the 1991 independence.
When will we hear an announcement like that?
That I don't know. It will be the events that will determine where I will be, how I will be, and with whom, but that fight has already started.
The fight has already started. We will help as much as we can, and beyond talking, hopefully. And very, very good luck to you, Madam President, for all the work you have lied ahead. Please give her a round of applause. And thank you very much.
Thank you.